Okay, let's get into it. Number 10. The Monty Hall problem. You're standing on a game show. 3 doors in front of you. Behind one of them is a car. Behind the other 2, a goat each. You pick a door. Let's say door 1. The host, who knows exactly what's behind everything, doesn't open your door. Instead, he strolls over to door 3, swings it open, and there's a goat. Then he smiles and asks the question that has started more arguments than almost anything in mathematics. Do you want to stick with door 1 or switch to door 2? Your gut says it doesn't matter. 2 doors left, 1 car, 50-50. Flip a coin, and your gut is wrong. If you switch, you win 2 times out of 3. If you stay, you win only 1 time in 3. You literally double your odds by changing your mind. Here's the thing that makes it click. When you first chose, you had a 1 in 3 chance of being right. That means there was a 2 in 3 chance the car was behind one of the other 2 doors. That never changed. The host then did you an enormous favor. He knows where the car is, and he deliberately opened a door with a goat behind it. He didn't pick randomly. So all of that 2 in 3 probability, which used to be spread across the 2 doors you didn't pick, now sits piled up on the single door he left closed. Your first door is still stuck at 1 in 3. The other door is carrying 2 in 3, all by itself, and people cannot stand this. When Marilyn Vos Savant published the answer in a magazine column in 1990, roughly 10,000 people wrote in to tell her she was an idiot. Hundreds of them had PhDs. Mathematics professors mocked her in print. Every one of them was wrong. Paul Erdos, one of the most brilliant mathematicians who ever lived, flat out refused to accept it until someone sat him down and ran a computer simulation in front of his eyes. So this is the gentle one. The warm-up. Nobody's reality is shattered by a goat. But notice what just happened. You were handed a situation with 3 doors, no tricks, no hidden cameras, and your brain confidently gave you an answer that was simply false. Not a matter of opinion. Provably, repeatably false. If your intuition can betray you that badly over a used car and a couple of goats, it's worth asking what else it's quietly getting wrong. And for the rest of this list, it gets a lot stranger than a game show. Number 9. Gabriel's horn. Take a simple curve. The line 1 over x. The kind of gentle downward slope you'd draw in a maths class, stretching off to the right forever, getting closer and closer to the floor, but never touching it. Now spin that curve around, like clay on a potter's wheel, so it sweeps out a solid shape. What you get is a horn, a long, elegant trumpet that tapers away into an infinitely thin point, stretching out to infinity. Now here's where your sense of reality starts to wobble. That horn is infinitely long, and yet the amount of space inside it, its volume, is finite. Not very large. Finite. If you did the calculus, the volume comes out to exactly pi. You could, in principle, fill this infinitely long trumpet with a finite bucket of paint, and it would never overflow. But the surface of the horn, the outside skin of it, that area is infinite. Sit with that for a second. You can fill the horn with a finite amount of paint, but you could never, ever paint the inside surface, because that surface goes on forever. The very same paint that completely fills the interior isn't enough to coat the walls that contain it. The container needs infinite paint. The thing it contains needs only a cupful. This isn't a modern brain teaser dreamed up to mess with you. Evangelista Torricelli discovered this back in 1643. That's before calculus was even properly invented. He worked it out with an older, clumsier method, and when he announced it, his fellow mathematicians thought it was almost obscene. A finite solid that was infinitely long. It felt like a crime against common sense, and they argued bitterly about whether infinity could really behave like this. Now, the honest footnote. The paint story has a catch. Real paint is made of atoms. It has thickness, and eventually the horn gets narrower than a single paint molecule. Mathematical paint has no thickness at all, which is the only reason the fill it but can't coat it line works so cleanly. So it's not a genuine logical contradiction, but strip the paint away and the naked fact remains, and it is completely, provably true. Here is a shape. It has finite volume and infinite surface area, at the same time, forever. Two different infinities living inside one object you could describe on a napkin. Reality, it turns out, is perfectly happy to be bounded and boundless in the same breath. It just waited until you weren't looking. Number 8. The Ship of Theseus. There's a wooden ship sitting in a harbor. It belonged to a hero, so the city keeps it as a monument. But wood rots. So every time a plank goes soft, the keepers pull it out and slot in a fresh, identical plank. A board here, a board there, year after year. Eventually, quietly, a day arrives when not a single original piece of wood is left. Every plank has been replaced. Question: is it still the same ship? Most people say yes. Of course, it's been the same ship the whole time. We only fixed it. Fine. But now the philosopher Thomas Hobbes walks in, back in 1655, and he ruins everything. He says, all right, imagine someone was following the repair crew around the whole time and quietly collecting every rotten plank they threw away. And imagine that person takes all those original planks, dries them out, and rebuilds the ship. The whole original ship reassembled from its actual original wood. Now you have two ships, one in the harbor, made entirely of new planks that was never taken apart, and one in a warehouse, made of every single original plank. Which one is the real Ship of Theseus? They can't both be it, and yet each one has a completely fair claim. The harbor ship has an unbroken history. It was never gone. The warehouse ship is made of the genuine, original material. Pick one, and you've thrown away a reason that felt just as strong. Now here's the part that should actually get under your skin. This isn't about boats. Your body does exactly this. The cells that make up most of your tissues are constantly dying and being replaced. Over the course of years, the overwhelming majority of the atoms in you are swapped out for new ones. The you reading this is built from largely different material than the you of a decade ago. So are you the same person you were at 7 years old? By the ship's logic, on what grounds? You don't share the matter, and you barely share the memories or the personality either. What exactly is the thread that makes that child you? Plutarch wrote that the philosophers were split right down the middle on the ship, one side insisting it stayed the same, the other insisting it did not, and 2,000 years later, we still haven't settled it, which suggests something uncomfortable. Maybe the same object over time was never a fact about the world. Maybe it's just a convenient story we tell so that words like you keep working. The planks are still being replaced. Right now. In you. Number 7. The Sorites Paradox. Here's a claim you'll agree with instantly. One single grain of sand is not a heap, obviously. It's one grain. Fine. Here's a second claim you'll also agree with. If you have something that isn't a heap, and you add just one more grain, it still isn't a heap. One grain can't turn a non-heap into a heap. That's absurd, right? A single grain is far too small to make that kind of difference. But watch what those two harmless sentences do when you let them run. Start with one grain, not a heap. Add one, still not a heap. Add one, still not a heap. Keep going. By that rule, you can never cross the line, because no single grain is ever the one that does it. So 100 grains isn't a heap. 1,000 isn't. 1,000,000 grains of sand is, apparently, still not a heap. which is ridiculous. 1,000,000 grains is obviously a heap. You can see it. You can stand on it. Somewhere in there, between 1 grain and 1,000,000, the word heap started to apply. But there is no specific grain where it happened. There's no magic number where grain number 4,986 flips it from not a heap to heap. Point to any grain and say, that one made it a heap. And it's plainly silly. And yet the transition happened. This is the Sorites Paradox, and it comes to us from Eubulides, a Greek thinker poking holes in things back in the 4th century BC. And before you write it off as a word game about sand, look at what it's really exposing. It's not about heaps. It's about almost every word you use to describe the world. When exactly does a warm room become a hot room? Add 1 degree at a time, and there's no boundary. When does a young person become old? When does a full head of hair become bald? 1 strand at a time. When does an embryo become a person? When does a living body become a dead one? Every one of these runs the exact same trap. No sharp line, but undeniably different ends. We move through life sorting everything into neat boxes, tall and short, rich and poor, child and adult. And the Sorites Paradox quietly points out that not one of those boxes has a real wall. We drew the lines ourselves and then forgot we drew them. The world isn't made of categories. It's made of gradients. The categories are just where we decided to stop counting grains. Number 6. The unexpected hanging paradox. A prisoner is brought before a judge. The judge says 2 things. First, you will be hanged at noon on 1 day next week, Monday through Friday. Second, and the judge is very clear about this, the day will be a surprise. You will not know, the night before, that tomorrow is the day. The prisoner goes back to his cell. And he's clever. He starts to think it through, and slowly a smile spreads across his face, because he believes he's just found a way out. It can't be Friday, he reasons. Because if I'm still alive on Thursday evening, then Friday is the only day left, and I'd know it was coming. That wouldn't be a surprise, and the judge promised a surprise. So Friday is impossible. Cross it off. But now, he thinks, Thursday is the last possible day. And if I'm alive Wednesday night, I'd know Thursday is it. So that's not a surprise either. Cross off Thursday. And by the exact same logic, Wednesday falls. Then Tuesday. Then Monday. One by one, the whole week collapses. The prisoner leans back, completely satisfied. The hanging is logically impossible. It cannot be a surprise on any day, so it cannot happen at all. Then, on Wednesday, at noon, the executioner arrives, and the prisoner is genuinely, utterly astonished. He never saw it coming, which means the judge was right the whole time. It was a surprise. His reasoning was airtight. Every single step followed from the last, and reality just walked straight through it as if it were made of paper. This one has tormented logicians since the 1940s, and the philosopher W.V.O. Quine took a serious crack at it. And the resolution, as far as there is one, is beautifully sneaky. The prisoner's whole argument depends on him being certain he'll be hanged. That certainty is what lets him eliminate Friday, then Thursday, and so on. But the moment he uses that logic to conclude the hanging can't happen at all, he's undermined his own certainty. He no longer believes it's coming. And the instant he stops believing it's coming, any day at all becomes a genuine surprise again. His proof that it couldn't happen is precisely the thing that made it possible. The confidence was the trap, and that's the quietly terrifying lesson buried in a story about a gallows. You can build a chain of reasoning where every link is solid, check it twice, find no flaw, and still arrive at a conclusion the universe cheerfully ignores. Being logically certain and being right are not always the same thing. Sometimes the certainty is the mistake. Number 5. The liar paradox. Here's a sentence, just 5 words. This sentence is false. That's it. That's the whole thing, and it might be the most dangerous handful of words in the history of logic. Try to decide whether it's true. Suppose it's true. Well, what it says is that it's false. So if it's true, then it's false. That's a contradiction. All right, flip it. Suppose it's false. But the sentence claims to be false. And if it really is false, then what it says is correct, which makes it true. So if it's false, it's true. There's no third option. It can't be true, because that makes it false. It can't be false, because that makes it true. The sentence sits there, perfectly grammatical, made of ordinary words, and it refuses to be either. It short-circuits the whole idea of truth, like a switch wired directly back into itself. And you can't just wave it away as a stupid trick, because people have been trying to kill this thing for 2,000 years, and it will not die. It goes back at least to Eubulides, the same Greek troublemaker behind the heap, and it echoes the old line about the Cretan who declares that all Cretans are liars. Every generation of logicians thinks they've finally cornered it, and it slips out again. The most serious blow came in 1936 from a logician named Alfred Tarski, and what he proved is genuinely unsettling. He showed that the problem isn't sloppy wording, it's structural. Any language rich enough to talk about its own sentences and to say of them that they're true or false will inevitably be able to build a version of this sentence. And the moment it can, contradiction leaks in. To keep truth consistent, Tarski argued, a language can't be allowed to fully define truth for its own statements. You need to step outside, to a higher language, just to talk safely about the truth of the one below. Think about what that means. It's not that we're not clever enough to solve the liar. It's that any system powerful enough to describe the world and honest enough to talk about itself carries this crack built into its foundations. Self-reference and truth cannot fully coexist. That same insight that a system can tie itself in knots just by referring to itself is the seed of some of the deepest results in all of mathematics and computer science. It's the shadow behind Gödel. It's lurking near the limits of what any machine can ever decide. 5 words. This sentence is false. A sentence that, by simply pointing at itself, opens a hole in logic that we have never been able to close. Number 4. Russell's Paradox. For most of history, mathematicians believed they were standing on solid ground. Underneath all the numbers and shapes was something simple and unshakable. The set, a collection of things. The set of all cats. The set of all numbers. Gather some objects together. Give the collection a name. Done. What could possibly go wrong with a bag of stuff? In 1901, Bertrand Russell asked one innocent question, and the floor gave way. Most sets don't contain themselves. The set of all cats is not itself a cat. The set of all books is not a book. Fine. But you can imagine a set that does contain itself. The set of all things that are not cats, for instance, is not a cat, so it belongs in itself. So Russell said, all right, let's build a very particular set. The set of all sets that do not contain themselves. Every self-excluding set gathered into one collection. Now ask the fatal question. Does this set contain itself? Suppose it does. But it's defined as the set of sets that do not contain themselves. So if it contains itself, it doesn't qualify to be in there, and it mustn't contain itself. Contradiction. All right, suppose it doesn't contain itself, but then it is a set that doesn't contain itself, which is exactly the membership requirement. So it must contain itself. Contradiction again. It contains itself if and only if it doesn't. The definition destroys itself. This looks like a party trick. It was not a party trick. It was a wrecking ball aimed at the foundations of mathematics, and it landed at the worst possible moment. There was a logician named Gottlob Frege who had spent his entire career building a rigorous foundation for all of arithmetic, from the ground up, on the logic of sets, his life's work. The second volume was literally at the printer, and a letter arrived from Russell, politely pointing out the paradox. Frege understood instantly that it tore a hole straight through his system. He added a stricken note to his book, admitting the foundation had collapsed. He wrote that a scientist can hardly meet with anything more unwelcome than to have the ground give way just as the work is finished. Now, mathematics did survive. This is the reassuring part. Logicians rebuilt set theory with careful new rules that simply forbid you from forming that self-swallowing set in the first place. The modern foundations are patched and solid. Working mathematicians lose no sleep over it today, but never forget what happened here. The single most certain, most rigorous field humans have ever built, the place we run to when we want something to be undeniably true, was brought to its knees by one sentence about a bag that may or may not contain itself. Certainty is more fragile than it looks, even in mathematics. Number 3, Thomson's lamp. This one starts with the most boring object imaginable, a lamp with a push-button switch. Press it, the light comes on. Press it again, the light goes off. You've used 1,000 of them. Nothing simpler exists. Now, we're going to do something impossible with it, and follow the logic all the way down. At the start, the lamp is off. We push the button, and it comes on. We wait half a minute, and push it again. Off. We wait 1/4 of a minute, and push it. On. We wait 1/8 of a minute. Push it. Off. And we keep having the waiting time. 1/16 of a minute. 1/32 of a minute. Faster and faster. On, off, on, off. Because each waiting time is half the one before, all of them added together only come to one single minute. Half plus 1/4 plus 1/8, on forever, sums to 1. So within exactly 1 minute, we complete an infinite number of button presses. Philosophers call this a super task, an infinite sequence of actions, finished in finite time. Here's the question, and it's so simple a child could ask it. At the 1 minute mark, when it's all over, is the lamp on or off? Try to answer. Say it's on, but every time we turned it on, we later turned it off again. There was never an on that didn't get canceled by a later off. So it can't be on. All right, say it's off. But every time we turned it off, we later turned it back on. Every off got undone. So it can't be off either. It has to be one or the other. A lamp is on or it's off. There's no third state. And yet, the sequence gives you no way to say which. And here's the sharpest part. It's not that the answer is hidden, or that we're not clever enough to find it. There genuinely is no answer. The infinite sequence of presses simply doesn't have a last one. There's no final flip that sets the closing state. The question is perfectly well formed, and it has no result at all. James Thomson dreamed this up in 1954, and it's a cousin of the ancient riddles of Zeno, but it's sharper. Zeno doubted that you could ever finish an infinite series of steps. Thomson says, fine, grant that you finish. Now just tell me the state at the end. And infinity goes silent. That's what makes this one linger. We use infinity casually, all the time, in physics and mathematics, as if it's just a very big number. Thomson took an ordinary bedside lamp and showed that the moment you let infinity actually complete, reality can stop having an answer. Number 2, Wheeler's delayed choice experiment. Everything until now has been logic, mathematics, philosophy, puzzles built in the mind. This one is different. This one was actually performed in a laboratory with real equipment, and the result is genuinely hard to breathe around. You've probably heard that light is strange. Sometimes a beam of light behaves like a wave, spreading out and rippling and interfering with itself. And sometimes it behaves like a stream of tiny particles, Individual photons? Little bullets? What decides which? Roughly, it depends on how you look at it. Set your experiment up to detect waves. You see wave behavior. Set it up to detect particles. You see particles. Which is already weird enough. The photon seems to know what you're looking for. So, the physicist John Wheeler, back in 1978, asked a devastating question. What if we wait? What if we let the photon go all the way through the experiment, past the point where it supposedly decides to be a wave or a particle, and only then, at the very last instant, do we choose which kind of measurement to make? The photon has already committed. It's already deep inside the apparatus. Our choice comes after. Common sense says the photon must have made its choice on the way in, and our late decision just catches it in whatever state it already picked. That's the only sane story. That is not what happens. When the experiment was actually built and run with single photons by Vincent Jacques and his team in 2007, the outcome was clean, and it was brutal. The photon's behavior always matched the choice made at the last moment. Choose the wave measurement at the end, and the photon behaves as though it traveled as a wave the whole way through, taking both paths. Choose the particle measurement, and it behaves as though it came down one single path like a bullet the entire time. The decision you make now appears to determine what the photon was doing before you decided. Let me be careful and honest here, because this is exactly where things get overhyped. No signal travels backwards in time. You cannot use this to send a message to the past, and no information moves faster than light. Nothing so cheap. What breaks is subtler and, if anything, worse. It's the assumption that the photon had a definite history at all before you measured it. It didn't. There simply was no fact about whether it was a wave or a particle until the measurement existed to ask. The past, for that photon, wasn't sitting there finished, waiting to be discovered. It stayed open, unwritten, until the present reached back and chose the ink. Number 1. Wigner's friend. We've saved the deepest one for last, because everything so far has bent a rule, or exposed a crack, or made your intuition look foolish. This one goes after the thing underneath all of it. The idea that there is a single, shared reality that we all live inside. The assumption that a fact is a fact, no matter who's asking. Here's the setup. The physicist Eugene Wigner imagined it back in 1961. Picture a friend sealed inside a perfectly isolated laboratory, and inside that lab is a quantum particle that can be in one of two states. Call them up and down. Before anyone looks, quantum mechanics says the particle is in a blur of both at once, a superposition. Now, the friend inside measures it. And for the friend, that's that. The blur collapses. She sees a definite answer. Let's say up. It's a real, settled fact in her world. But now think about you, standing outside the sealed lab. You can't see in. As far as your equations are concerned, nothing has collapsed, because from the outside, the lab is still perfectly isolated. So quantum mechanics tells you to describe the whole lab, the particle, and your friend, and her measurement, and her certainty, all of it, as one giant superposition. Still blurred. Still both. So here's the collision. Inside the lab, there is a definite fact. The particle is up. Your friend knows it. Outside the lab, there is no such fact yet. Everything is still undecided. Two observers, the same event. And they cannot agree on whether a fact even exists. For a long time, you could dismiss this as philosophy, a quirk of interpretation. Then, in 2019, a team led by Massimiliano Proietti actually built a version of it, using 6 entangled photons to play the roles of the observers. And they tested whether the two observers' records could always be reconciled into one consistent, shared set of facts. The answer written into the data was no. The results violated the inequality that reconciliation would require. The two observers' facts can be made permanently, provably irreconcilable. And here is the blade of it. It is not that one observer is right and the other is confused. It's not that one has better information. Within quantum mechanics, both records are absolutely correct. Two contradictory accounts of the same event, and reality endorses both. Which forces a question that should follow you out of this video. When you say something really happened, what do you actually mean? We've always assumed that underneath all our different viewpoints, there's one true version of events, one master copy that reality keeps. These experiments whisper that maybe there isn't. Maybe what happened is not one thing. Maybe it was never one thing. We move through our lives certain that we're all standing on the same ground, seeing the same world, living in the same story. And the deepest physics we have looks back at us, very quietly, and refuses to confirm it. Thank you for watching and sticking till the end. We've got plenty more videos coming in the future. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss them. See you in the next one.